Hello, I'd just like to welcome everyone into our next series of our candidate conversation. This candidate conversation is all about policy and procedure within the School Board of Education. We have with us a wonderful guest. I'd like to introduce our first panelist, Judge Gay F. Chase. Judge Chase is the first African American administrative judge for the United States Merit Systems Protection Board in the Chicago Regional Office. And she has experience on various boards. She has served on the board for the Answer Inc. And the board of directors, and she currently holds position as a vice president. She also served as a board of education for Lindop District in the village of Broadview. We are very honored to have Judge Chase with us. And with her vast knowledge and experience, and not including her tireless work in various villages throughout Proviso. Thank you so much for being with us, Judge Chase. We also have with us our State Rep Norma Hernandez. She was the first Latina ever elected to serve as a trustee at the Triton Community College. During her term, she has promoted transparency in an equitable administration of Triton's $76 million budget. She has recently been elected as the state representative for the 77th district and is a proud Proviso graduate. And we are really proud of her accomplishments and the way she represents our district. Thank you for being here, Norma. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
I'm going to go ahead and bring in our candidates. We have some wonderful school board candidates for District 209. We have with us today Sandra Hickson. And Sandra is a Maywood native. She is a graduate of Proviso East High School. She currently resides in Westchester, and she's worked as a substitute teacher for Proviso West High School during the 2021-22 school year. She's recently served on the District 88 Bellwood School Board for 4 years. And Ms. Hickson, she wants to ensure transparency, accountability from the District 209 School Board and Superintendent. She believes that we need a fresh board leadership that can help develop and implement policies to create positive and long-term change. Thank
Good
you for
evening,
being.
everyone.
And we also have Jenny Barbahan. Jenny is a lifelong resident of Forest Park. She has actively endeavored to bring positive change to the district through her work for as a co-chair for the Proviso East Action Team for partners under the former principal, Dr. Patrick Hardy. Her priorities as a board member are restoring stability, safety, mental health for all students in the district. And Jenny has plans to focus on improving the work environment, school culture, in the district for students, staff, and teachers. She's also a mother of four, and her oldest attends Proviso East. Thank you for being here, Jenny.
Thanks. Happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday. We also have David. He is a data engineer with a global manufacturing company, and his plans is to bring his expertise in analyzing logistics and financial data to the District 209 board to ensure fiscal responsibility as a district priority. He also wants to see the District 209 improve community outreach to underserved groups, including special education and English language learners. David and his wife and three young children are regular volunteers at the local food pantry, and his family is active in the Cub Scouts. Thank you, David, for being here.
Hey, good evening. Happy to be here.
Awesome. So, guys, I would just really appreciate you guys having this conversation because I believe in our district, there's a lot of confusion on exactly how the school board operates and should function in a way that I think should be able to give more value to the community. So we wanted to be able to have a conversation on, how best to utilize the school board and what policy and procedures should people expect from your school board. So I had a few questions for our panelists, and we just wanted to kind of get into it. We could start with Rep Hernandez. Okay, I just wanted to see from your perspective of a former board member for Triton College, what do you
Mhm.
see as one of the most important roles of the school board in its relationship and responsibility to the community?
Yeah, I think for someone that was recently elected and also new in this role as a board trustee, for me personally, it was really understanding how can I understand the process and also the mechanisms of what it takes to run a community college board, and then knowing what questions to ask, especially when you think about representation and thinking in terms of equity. How far are we looking at equity through all internal things, right? Like how are we auditing things? How are we evaluating things? How are we looking at policies and procedures and the way we're even contracting people? How are we looking at all of these things through a lens of equity? But I think generally speaking, these board members that represent our communities, especially in schools, how are they standing up to social justice issues publicly, right? If you are in a predominantly um, representing a school that has a majority Black and Brown student body, how are you taking any public actions against racism or any injustices that we see? Because I think that tells a lot about how they see our students if they are fighting for things that we know are impacting us directly. And I think that seeing any kind of like stats on discrimination, salary tables, like comparing that across the board, what are our retention numbers? There's just so much that goes into, seeing how we as a board member are looking at all of this through an equitable lens. We have to ask these questions. And for me in the beginning, it took time to kind of understand the process of the community college. And then that's when my questions started coming in. It's like, well, what are our stats? I need to understand and ask more questions, because the more you ask, the better understanding you have of who's really in charge of these schools. But I think overall is just really getting into knowing the process first, and then the questions really start coming in after. Is kind of how I took initiative in the beginning.
Okay, great. And so did that yield you like the information that you were looking for when you went joined the board fresh, new ideas, and you were looking for that information? How
Mhm.
accessible was it?
In the beginning, it wasn't as accessible. It's there. I definitely did get information that I was looking for, but it kind of took a little bit of my own personal research to really know what was the accurate information that I was receiving. And I think it should be more accessible where it's public data. You have to really ask internally to get that information. It's not information that is generally public. For example, they were focused on diversity, inclusion, and equity assessment. That report that I got, but you have to ask for that report and understand the numbers. It's not like public information that's on the website. But because as an internal person, I have access to that information. But I think that kind of those kind of numbers and data should be online already on the platform. I think it should be that accessible.
Okay, great. And so what do you think is a really good best practice for a school board that is
Mhm.
represented from the high school level? You came from Proviso, high schools, so
Mhm.
understanding how that works as well as how a board works. Um, what would be the best practice for our board to represent these students that are, diverse learners, English language learners, people from, various economic or social statuses?
Yeah, I think one of the best things to do, and I have since my background is in like research. I worked at a research center at UIC for a while, for about 5 years. So all of my work, and naturally how I think it should be data driven, and we have to make sure that whatever we are implementing, whatever methods we are implementing to improve student academic performance, is being proven through the data. And if there's no data that's showing we're moving in the right direction, then there's something that there needs to be another assessment done that tells us whatever we're doing now is working or not working. But it should be focused on data driven, but also narratives, right, of the students, having focus groups. And I think that and me now visiting multiple school districts as a state rep, some of the conversations that I've had, for example, in Addison Township, is a lot of their work is data driven. They have had really good numbers. Speaking to the superintendent, telling me about it. Um, I think that we have to stop and look at what, in general, right? Like, how are we making sure that whatever we're teaching in Proviso schools is also showing through the community college level, right? Because a lot of our students that are going to Trenton College are coming from Proviso. At least that's where majority of the students are coming from. But if we're seeing that a lot of students are not graduating on time and that they're failing out of community college, then what's the performance metrics here that we were doing from the beginning, and what's not working, and are we even having conversations with each other, both community college and also high schools that are obviously attending the community college?
So that's like basically, I know that those relationships are very important. Like the relationships that our superintendent and our school districts, like all superintendents for the grammar schools, for the
Mhm.
high schools, should be kind of collaborating,
Yeah.
um, because our kids have to be able to see those steps. How do I get from here to there? From here to
Yeah.
Triton.
Mhm.
So that's important. And I know that, as you were talking about getting the data. So once you have that kind of information, um, how do you implement a policy around it, like to make changes that's necessary based on the data that you've come up with?
Yeah. So I guess an example from where I get this from or have this understanding is I remember visiting Chicago State University, and it's also they have I think it's like top 2 or 4%, I forgot, but it's a very good high number of economic mobility. That's when students come out, majority of them are moving at a positive rate with good paying jobs. So a lot of their whatever research questions they're asking, or however they're asking these questions through their survey, is telling them the story of how their school is performing, and their
Mhm.
numbers are looking very, very good. The college dropout rate has gone down. Their graduation rates have gone up. So there's a lot of that. The way that they're doing their scholarships, right? They have one called, I think it's called Rise. That's also helping. It's technically helping students that are struggling and have an average GPA. It's not those high performing students, right? So you're tackling and targeting students that are not performing the best. And I think
Mhm.
that's really important because for me personally, I was one of those students that I was getting straight A's at Proviso East. I graduated in white, but I still had a 15 on my ACT. So I didn't get the scholarships that I wanted or get into the universities that I wanted, right? And I didn't have that financial support at Trenton because I was paying things out of pocket because I couldn't get scholarships. So how are we making sure that's a good pilot right there, technically, for our schools to possibly look at and be like, you know what, how can we gather funding? How can we make sure that students who are struggling are giving the right tools to perform well from high school, whether it's juniors, seniors, to going into community college? So I think it's just kind of ideas that, again, as a board or teachers or groups come together and think about ways and initiatives that we can pilot on. And then from there, look at the data. It takes time, right, to really see if it takes a year, 2 years to really execute something like this. But I think that it takes that collaboration and that space, safe space to have these conversations and to make sure that we're creating something tangible that we can then have data assessed through it afterwards. So that's usually how I think the right way it should be done is really through collaboration, making sure that we are using something that's tangible that can give us the right, I guess, feedback in return.
I
Yeah,
love
because it
that
was.
the like coming up with those initiatives, and I love that you also talked about giving things time.
Mhm.
You know, 'cause you can't implement something and then expect 6 months later to see this phenomenal result, right? Everything takes time, and I
Mhm.
think one important aspect of like policies and procedures is having a good policy is step one. And then having a good implementation strategy and plan is really step two, right? So
Right.
just having it on paper is all good and well, but the way we implement it and then the way we gauge success, and the board, really a basic function of the board is to ensure that the performance is there, right? That our policies and our procedures are performing
Mhm.
how we expect them to. And if they're not, we have to, readjust and reevaluate. And then
Right.
during that whole time, make sure that, our commitment to the community is our top priority and our commitment to our students. So how do we, put those initiatives into place, and then ensuring that the implementation is there as well.
Mhm.
And then if I may add, step 3 would be a feedback loop where, and this falls in with State Rep Hernandez, her idea of data-driven analysis, right? If you have that feedback loop, you can see where you're doing well and not so well and adjust your plan accordingly.
Mhm. Exactly.
Yeah, I think those things are extremely important. Just the evaluation, analysis, and if you have to do any type of auditing or whatever it takes to get the information, to get that set of information in front of you, so then that guides your policies. And we really need to have some of that transparency where our students can be seen, and to the public, what do those numbers look like? What are the actual facts as it pertains to what's happening with the students? So the data-driven part is extremely important, and thank you for that information too. Um, the next thing I would like to do is to just talk about, as your time on the board, what would you say was the most challenging, and what would you say was your best, accomplishment?
Yeah, I think for me the most challenging was definitely in the beginning as I was coming in. I didn't I wasn't the most, I was an upsetting one, right, for many, where folks completely did not want me to be a winner in this race, and now alone come into a board that has been used to having the same folks around for decades. So some of that pushback definitely was felt in the beginning, on my very, very first meeting. And I think just adjusting to some of the pushback that the teachers were having against the board. I remember, I think it was the second or third meeting, teachers were wearing shirts that say "We will not be silenced." There was a lot going on in the beginning. So kind of learning my limitations, because I also still am only one vote out of 7 board members. And even though I may feel strongly about an issue, I can't completely get out of character or show any type of divisiveness, because that's never good. And especially when you're holding the seat, you still have to engage with your colleagues no matter what. You guys are in a board together, and you have to keep it civil. You can't just, it's just not etiquette. So for me, it was just kind of learning that in the beginning, that even though I didn't feel welcomed in the beginning, or wasn't the favorite candidate to win, I had to still hold my ground, educate myself a lot, because it was also a reality check for me to learn. This is a lot of learning, a lot of work. It's my first time ever being on a board in general, and then learning the responsibility that you have, but knowing that you are very limited. And I think throughout time, they got to know me, and they got to know my real my real reason for being there, and it was just to help. I was helping students there. I was getting emails from previous students. Some of the admin didn't need support with something, and I was helping them. So I think overall they got to see my genuineness and wanting to be there. And I think one of the most proudest things was really winning the state rep seat, because it brought a different type of I would say energy to the board, because they see now that I am now in a higher position of power, and that this is going to still be someone that they're going to be engaging with, because this is going to, Strand College is also in my district. I'm not here to play games, and I'm here to really do the work. I'm here to really hold people accountable. And as they saw, I was asking the right difficult questions in the beginning, and it's not going to stop now with my state rep seat. So I think it just provided them, they see the seriousness in the work that I'm doing. So I have a lot more respect for my peers in the board now. So that definitely has been my proudest moment.
That is awesome, and kudos to you. With all of the work, I know that you're working on new committees that within the state rep role, so that is just going to keep you so busy. But we do appreciate how you represent us in Proviso, and that information that you just gave is, very valuable, I think, to our candidates. So thank you. Now I have a question for Judge Chase, and I'm going to go into your first question would be, just from your perspective as a former board member on various boards that you sit on, what would you say is the best practice for running a successful board meeting?
Well, I mean, of course, Robert's Rules of Order are parliamentary procedure. However, of course, Robert's Rules of Order are just procedures. They're not the law. But if you follow Robert's Rules of Order when you're running your meeting, you have a set structure to the meeting that allows everyone to be heard and to make decisions with respect and without confusion. So certainly, although a board is not required to follow those rules, I would certainly advise any board to follow parliamentary procedure as a structure for conducting a successful board meeting.
Yes, and I think that's extremely important.
You know, the rules protect the rights of the majority to make decisions, the rights of the minority to be heard. It also protects the rights of individual board members and the rights of the minority. The minority has the right to be heard and to voice their dissent. They have the right to have their dissent noted in the minutes. But once dissent is given and the vote is taken, it's the decision of the collective body, even those who objected. So I think it's real important, as State Rep Hernandez said, that we learn to work together collegially as a board, because if your board is not working collegially, it appears that way to the community. Okay, so it sends a message to the community that the board itself, which is the highest entity within the district, is not on the same page, and it just lends to additional confusion. So we also have to keep in mind that individual members on the board have the right to receive meeting notifications. They have the right to attend all the meetings, to introduce and second motions, and to speak on agenda items after first seeking recognition of the chair. And I want to raise that because the chair, or in this case, the president of District 209 board, has a really, really critical role. And the president of that board has to be able to set the tone of that meeting, control that meeting, and also control the members of that board to ensure that we are presenting ourselves in a manner most professional to the voting public. And of course, the final element of the individual rights is their right to vote on any issue that's placed before them.
And that's very, I mean, a lot of that is things that, you know, as you go to some of the 209 board meetings, you notice that those are things that, you know, if they were more well developed, we would be able to see a better, you know, outcome from some of the meetings. And I like that you said too that, you know, from the board president, and sometimes just setting that tone, it doesn't necessarily have to be done in public. I know that, you know, I'm not very familiar with the closed session and what things have to be, you know, you guys, but I would imagine that some of those things could be done during the closed session.
I mean, I think if there's a topic that's that's potentially causing a split in the board, yes, there certainly can be discussion in closed session about that. And it's probably better for the public, better for the board to take up as much of that discussion as possible in closed session. Of course, you have to come out of closed session to vote. But I mean, the board has other mechanisms that they can use to ensure that they can work well together. The Illinois Association of School Boards offers tons and tons of help in terms of that, in terms of board retreats and the board getting together outside of a board meeting, in terms of attempting to better those relationships and to build those relationships, because as new board members come on, and maybe there's some board members that are already there, you want to build those relationships. So there are other things that the board can do, and its leaders should be encouraging in terms of enhancing those relationships, so that when we do get before the public, we can present a more united front. Individual board members have the right to dissent on issues, and in all honesty, they can go public with that. Now, I mean, do we like it when they do? No, but they do have the right to do that, right? They're representing a group of constituents, and that might be where their constituents are at, and so they might feel a real need to let their constituents know that we disagree with this, or this is where we're coming from. And although that's not the best situation, it's the reality of what potentially happens on school boards. I did want to mention one other thing when we start talking about board meetings, because it comes up a lot. Again, Robert's Rules of Order is just advisory, but we do have to follow the Open Meetings Act, the Illinois Open Meetings Act. And one thing that I wanted to make sure that everyone understood is that the Open Meetings Act in Illinois states that any person must be permitted an opportunity to address public officials under the rules established and recorded by the public body. And so basically, the body itself gets to set the rules for public comment, when they're going to occur, at what point in that meeting, whether they're going to limit the amount of time that the public gets to speak. But every person has the right to be permitted the opportunity to address public officials under the Illinois Open Meetings Act. And actually, there was a case in the state of Illinois, which was in a school district, where the public body denied an individual the right to address it during its open meeting. The public body's rules required individuals to submit written requests at least 5 work days before the meeting. In this instance, the individual's request was submitted 4 days before the meeting and therefore denied by the public body. The Illinois Association of School Boards found that a rule like this violates the Open Meetings Act. The Open Meetings Act requires public bodies to allow any individual to address them under the rules established and recorded by the body. Rules for addressing a public body may only impose reasonable time, place, and manner regulations that are necessary to further a significant governmental interest. So I did want to, although Robert's Rules of Order is not a law, I did want to address the fact that all school board meetings are held under the Illinois Open Meetings Act.
Thank you. I have a follow-up kind of question, and how do, in your experience, board members, right, the principal foundation is you have that connection to your community. And you also, the board has to be responsible for itself. So if there's kind of a very split disagreement between the board, how would you suggest that a board works together to get past that, to not only be responsible for itself and be respectful and follow all of the Open Meetings Act and things like that, but also allow the community to have its chance to be heard and to speak?
Well, I think if there's a really controversial issue, the board should make sure that it allows time for audience comments around that issue. The agenda is posted at least 48 hours in advance, so the public should be aware of the topics that are going to be discussed at a meeting. For example, we were going to go to a uniform policy in District 92. We knew that that was a very controversial issue with respect to the parents in our district. So, and we did have a big turnout at our meeting when we were going to take a vote on whether or not we would institute a uniform policy. And we did allow, at our meetings, we allowed for audience comments early because we spent a lot of time in closed session many times. So we did not make people wait till after we went into and came out of closed session. And so we did allow additional time to hear audience comments. So I think if there's a controversial issue that the board knows could be split in your community, that, you know, you might want to make sure that you are taking the time and allowing the public to make appropriate comments.
Thank you. That's a really good suggestion and a really way to navigate that.
Yeah, I know that we have had, that communication, those conditions to come up regularly, and just knowing that, you know, with the new, a new set of eyes on things, and parents being more engaged, that our community is now looking and listening. So they need the tools to know how to engage better. So one of the things that, people need an understanding of is, like, how do I get information from the district? How do I request information when I feel that, you know, there's something that I should know about this budget, or that I should know about a new policy or a new hire, what's the proper procedures for FOIA, and what should a person expect when they're doing a FOIA?
I think Gay, thank you. I think that Gay talked about the FOIA process.
Not yet.
She hasn't talked about it, but it's FOIA. So you have parents, the community has a right to FOIA the district. So she just said I haven't talked about it yet. So I'm going to turn that over to her about FOIA. I'm sorry, Gay.
Oh, no problem. Okay. Well, I did check today because I wanted to know who District 209's current FOIA officer is, and Tiffany Jenkins currently handles the FOIAs that are received in District 209. The Illinois Freedom of Information Act requires public bodies to provide information that is requested by the public. So the site, I wanted to give you the site. It's the Illinois Combined Statutes, 5 of the Illinois Combined Statutes, 140, Section 4, which states that each school district is required to post specific information regarding the school district as a part of FOIA. When a written request for information is received, the district must comply within 5 working days. The Act, however, provides that under certain circumstances, for example, if the requested records cannot be located in the course of a routine search or additional efforts have to be made to locate them, the response may be extended. So that happens. The district should first requested additional letter at the end of the next 5 days.
One moment, we're having some technical audio concerns.
I wanted to chime in while
Okay, go. Yes.
well, one thing about the FOIA, I think, Eileen, you mentioned that, or I believe it was State Rep Hernandez mentioned that this information should be public and easily accessible. To be honest, I don't think many of our community members know the process, right, for filling out the FOIA. And I, for one, would like to make that, would like to see like a community workshop or some sort of video that enables our community members to start asking the questions, right? Because it's through the questions that we can seek better answers. If no one's asking any questions, then we don't know that there's a problem.
Well, I mean, again, FOIA is, there's certain information that you're not going to get under FOIA. There are 7 exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act. You certainly can't get Privacy Act information. You're not going to get specific information with persons' names and any personally identifying data. However, if you make a request and they're going to deny that request, they are required to provide you with the reason for the denial, which is an appealable action, okay, which you can take up. So I think that it certainly would be helpful for people to better understand FOIA, but at the end of the day, they can request whatever they want to request, and there should be an interactive process between that person making that request and the district in responding to that request. As I said, the district has 5 days. They can get an additional 5 days if necessary. The district can charge depending upon how many copies or how many pages the FOIA request will take up in responding. So typically, I think the first 50 pages, black and white pages, are free, and then the district can charge for any additional pages. So the fundamental right guaranteed by the Act is the right to inspection. While you may obtain copies of records requests, you are not required to purchase copies of records in order to gain access to them. So if it was a huge request and you didn't want to pay for it, the district still would have to grant you access to review the documentation. So I just think that if people are making requests and those requests are denied, or if in fact they're not responding to requests for FOIA, the requester should then contact the public access counselor who is available at the Attorney General's office. Okay, and then from the Attorney General's office, the person would have the right to seek judicial review of any decision on a denial of a FOIA. So if I make a FOIA request and the district does not respond to my FOIA request at all, that's a denial of my request for that information. That's tantamount to a denial. And then I then have the right to go to the public access counselor.
And Gay, are there any consequences then to the district or the Board of Education for being out of compliance to responding to FOIAs?
You know, I'm not prepared to answer that. I don't know. I don't know if the Attorney General has the right to prosecute a district or take an action against a district. But what the Attorney General does certainly have the right to do is to require that the district provide the information under FOIA. So typically the initial step in the process would be to require them legally to provide that information requested if the information, you know, meets all the requirements of or if the information does not meet one of the exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act. So I'm not sure about any sort of a punishment to the district because they have the authority to make the district provide the information.
Thank you.
That is really great information. A lot of times, you know, the parents or the community come to the board meeting and, you know, they have the questions and the questions may or may not be answered. So it's just learning what their next steps are to, like, you know, getting through a process. I have a problem within the district, and any one of you guys can answer that. If I'm a parent and I come to the district with a problem, I've gone through a chain of command as far as my teacher, the principal, and now I'm here at the board because that's my, you know, the next step I'm thinking. Is that the proper way to get it addressed? And what happens when the board doesn't give you the satisfaction or you're still frustrated?
Okay, one of the biggest issues with respect to a school board is that a board member has to know the difference between governance, which is the job of the school board, and management, which is the administration's job. So once again, depending upon what that parent's issue is, board members have to be very, very careful about getting involved in individual circumstances and cases, okay? Because that's not our job. Our job is to govern the district, okay? So what I would suggest, if we have a parent who's not meeting with any satisfaction, and I hate to say that because sometimes, you know, our administrators and our teachers can't tell you what you want to hear, you know, depending upon what the issue is, it is what it is. Do you understand what I'm saying? For example, I mean, a lot of times parents are very upset if the district wants to test their child for, you know, behavioral disorders or other types of disorders, right? And parents get really upset about that. And they don't want their child to be subject to an IEP. And so many times they'll want to take that up, you know, up the chain of command. And all that I can tell you is that, I'm sorry if you can't see me, I hope you can hear me. All I can tell you is that it's really important as a board member that you not engage in those circumstances, right, with the parent. Now, you can take a note of that parent's issue and you can bring that back and maybe discuss that, but really you should take it to the administration, right? Because a lot of times, like I say, parents are just not happy with what that teacher might have to say. And I tell parents all the time, and I know that it's not necessarily true, but I told parents all the time that the teacher's always right, right? Because I don't want parents telling their children that the teacher's wrong, right? The teacher's always right, right? But we can figure out whatever's going on, right? But I'm always going to refer that parent back to my administration to do the job that they are paid to do. So the bringing that kind of issue to the board is not necessarily the place where that kind of issue should end up. Number one, we don't want people talking about their individual children or their personal circumstances at an open meeting, right? That's a private conversation. So when someone approaches you on the side, you can take it up. You can listen to their concerns, but what you really need to do is to look at where that needs to be addressed at through the administrative process.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot to navigating this process and to, really, being fully engaged as a community, as a board member, to make sure that we're all working together and, trying to solve the issues and get our students off on the right foot. And so with our candidates, I just wanted to know, and I'll start with you, Sandra, if you can give us some of your perspectives on school board policy. I know that you have sat on the school board for District 88. And so what are some of your perspectives on it?
My perspective is simply this. As a school board, we need to work together for the betterment of the student and the betterment of the community. And I've heard two excellent speakers tonight talk about professionalism. We must maintain professionalism behind closed doors and in public. We must come across as a unified front. Are we going to agree on everything? Absolutely not. But it's how we speak to each other. Setting the tone is very, very important. If we come out chaotic and yelling and screaming, guess what? It's going to filter down to the students and the community. And that's not what a school board is about. Gay is absolutely correct. It is about governance. That's what we are elected to do, is to govern.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eileen, I just wanted to add something else because I thought it was really great when Representative Hernandez spoke about making data-driven decisions, particularly at the community college level. At every level, you should be making data-driven decisions, right? But I do want to tell you that having spent 10 years on a school board, that moving that student achievement is much easier said than done. And I want to say that because a big part of what we deal with in the Proviso Township is parents who are not engaged. Okay, and parents play a very, very significant role in our ability to educate their children, right? So it's not, I mean, the school board can do everything that it should do. When I was president of a school board, I passed the educational referendum. I doubled the per pupil spending. I built an addition to the school building. I spent a ton of money on parental engagement, and my needle moved maybe just a tad, right? So it's really the entire school community that has to collaborate, as Representative Hernandez said. And in these cases, it really has to be the school board, the administration, the teachers, who are a real critical piece of this puzzle in terms of our community, and also our parents and our students. Okay, so when we start talking about collaborating and bringing people together, there's a whole lot of moving parts to that. And so when we start talking about strategically planning on how we're going to move our district forward, everybody needs to be engaged and involved in that strategic planning process.
Absolutely. Everybody definitely needs to be engaged. And it really takes, when they say it takes the village, it takes the village, because if we are not working collaboratively, we're not getting anything done. And so that's why, for a lot of parents, when you talked about earlier, setting that tone on that school board, making sure that those school board members are able to work together first. And then, because, if you have, too much going on there and not enough being focused on the students, I think that's where we kind of fall into it. So it's all worth it to me to move that needle however much you can, and to use that data to get it there. Because if we're being fed data that is incorrect or inaccurate, we definitely won't be moving a needle anywhere at all, because we won't even know where we are. And so I think that, like you and both Rep Hernandez said, there's pathways to getting there, and as long as we all work together, we can do it. Just wanted to give the candidates time to give their perspective. David,
Yep.
if you have a perspective on, this school board and policy.
Sure.
This
So
is
in reference to that comment, moving the needle, as long as I feel like if you move it in the right direction, that's good, right? You're making progress, you can adjust and whatnot. And as a data engineer, learning about the Roberts Rules of Order is fundamental, because in my profession, we follow procedures, right? Because we follow procedures because we know what the outcome is, and we want to repeat that outcome. With in applying those rules of order, we know what the outcomes are, and we could set those expectations to the community. Like, this is the level of professionalism you can expect from us. This is the level of engagement you can expect from us, and then the outcomes, right? The community will know what to expect from school board meetings that are run well and efficient.
Yeah, and to add on to what David's saying too, is part of how I view policy and procedure as a board member is to make sure that we keep those ties with our community, and that we have board committees that are going to be our experts, right? And making sure that there's a seat at that table for all different voices and all different stakeholders, right? Our teachers are experts in teaching. Our community leaders are experts in our community, and our students are experts on themselves and their fellow students. So making sure that everybody has a voice and has a stake in that, and then driving that policy to make sure that we put it in not hastily, but that we have all voices heard, and that we can make a plan to implement. And I know that sounds kind of like a long process and maybe a little bit boring, but it ensures that we keep our ties with the community. It ensures that we're doing good governance by doing our due diligence and hearing from all the different perspectives, having that roundtable discussion, fleshing out the dissenting opinions, and and making sure that there's a plan forward that's well thought out, that is taking into consideration equity imperatives throughout all three schools, because our policy has to, will be for Proviso West, Proviso East, and PMSA. So is that policy going to be equitable at all three schools?
May I add something too? You have to read the policy. You just can't take somebody's word for it. You have to do your due diligence. You have to do your own research. You have to look and see, is this working? And just not to be on a school board and not understand what is going on, there's an issue with that. There's a problem with that. So for me, it's reading the policy, and there's nothing wrong with saying, I don't understand this. I need help with understanding this policy. There's nothing wrong with asking for help.
Yeah, and a lot of times you can, table an issue, right? You can get yourself some time to review that and make, like Sandra said, make some informed decisions as a board and not hastily. We do have some questions in the audience. Let's see if Jordan can get them queued up for us. One question from Katrina Thompson is, how do you engage the parents to meet the goals of the district? How do you engage the parents to meet the goals?
I think,
yes, Norma. Go ahead, Norma.
That kind of similar. I've had a question like this similarly on another conversation that I was in, but I think for me, investing in like parent mentoring programs is really good, because I think that a lot of the time, especially non-English speaking parents, for example, my parents didn't know the school system. I was the first one that attended the school systems, right? So I was able to kind of trick my parents in a way where I could only tell them what I wanted to tell them. And I think that we are in different times now, but I think that allowing initiatives that have like a parent mentoring program that allows access for the parents to come into the school and either do some volunteer work or just making them feel a part of the process allows them to learn more about how the school systems work. And I think naturally sometimes that just creates a different channel or a different conversation opportunity for parents to get more engaged. And that's where you can do a lot of that. You plant those seeds early on, right? Having them, be a part of the conversations more. But and also it helps the students be more accountable to their grades and the way that they're performing and things like that. But I think a parent mentoring program is a good way to have them engaged.
That's a great idea. And in addition to that, I think it's important, especially in Proviso, is to find what are the barriers to parent engagement, right? We don't know how to help tick parent engagement up and improve it if we don't know what are the barriers. Is it childcare? Is it, language services? But so we have to kind of then evaluate why we don't have the parent engagement that we want so that we can kind of focus our efforts more structured.
Yeah, this is Gay. We did a whole parent series at Lindop, bringing in Dr. Kwanzaa Kunjufu, who would speak openly and honestly to parents and moms, single moms, on the things that they needed to do. We engaged the children. They could bring kids always to any parental event that we had. We had a room where the kids could come. We fed them. We had people in that room to take care of them, if that were an issue. But also what we also tried to really do a lot of was identifying those parent leaders that were out there to get them engaged in our PTO. And many times you can target those people, who they are because they show up all the time. And sometimes they say, oh, I'm too busy. But if you really let them know that you need their assistance, then you have to target them. But you have to look for a multitude of ways to get your parents out. And I do like the process of parent mentoring. But you got to try everything. You got to try everything. You got to continue to fight.
And something that we're severely lacking on is collaboration with something that we're lacking on, I think, is collaboration with our foundational school districts, right? So we have these middle schoolers, our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. Do they have involved parents that will then follow them to the high school level as well? Do we even have elementary K through 5? Parent groups and parent leaderships, and how do we as the high school collaborate with the foundation schools and keep that parent engaged, not just in 9th grade, but from kindergarten all the way through?
And, it's important to have those continuity programs, as Jenny was saying, in the elementary, but I'd also like to see it beyond high school, as State Rep Hernandez mentioned, that there was no continuity between Proviso East and Triton. So maybe something between the foundational schools all the way to the community college.
Mm-hmm.
This is Sandra. I'm actually honored because I have a parent here this with Gay and I when I was on the school board, and I want her to give you her perspective.
It's Tanita LaShore.
Hi, yes. My kids went through District 88, and yes, Ms. Hickson, she was on the board at that present time. I think one of the things that's important when parents feel as if, my voice is going to be heard, and at the same time, I can tell you exactly, where I'm coming from a parent's perspective. I think when there's that mutual respect, and they know that it's always going to be mutual respect, whether your kid or is in the right, or you're trying to bring something new in the school as far as something to do with the curriculum. I think when you engage the parents more to let them know that they're a part of the process, and even if you have to do it 2, 3, or 4 times, they get it after a while. And the fortunate thing for me at that time, I did have the superintendent. She was very open-minded. And like I said, the board members did not, Ms. Hickson, I know for a fact, they didn't have a problem with speaking with the parents about things that were going on and respecting and being open-minded to what the parents had to say. So that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your perspective on that as a parent, and making sure that we stay engaged, because you're not going to reach every parent. You're not going to reach them all the time. Maybe some things will speak to them versus other initiatives, and it's the same with the students. That there's a student that you may not get to get their parent there, but that student is taking that information. They can do what they can to try to engage in some programs, but they may not have that parent, but they still get the information, and all you can do is continue to try. And so parent engagement is a long time, nemesis of, trying to get this process of making things better for our students, because parents have to work. They have a lot of other things fighting for their time while they're trying to care for their children. But at the same time, it's important to be a part of their education.
Yeah, I just want to focus on something that all three prospective board members said, and they talked about transparency. And I think the more transparent you are and the more information that you provide to parents, the more that allows those parents to respond to that information. So I also think commend all three candidates for their commitment to having a transparent board, a board that shares information. A lot of times our parents don't have any idea what's going on, okay, because the information is not being shared, okay? So I just want to thank all three of you for your commitment to transparency.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I also wanted to say something quickly, because I do believe transparency is really important, and not just surface level transparency. You have to really be transparent about the way you're designing these processes. And a good example of that, the questions that I had to ask when I was at Triton, or still at Triton, was about, again, this diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment that you're investing over $20,000, right? And something that's supposed to bring a difference to the school. And it's supposed to be based on student input, right? So you create the design, the model of the whole process, but you only engaged less than 5 students. So how are we really being authentic about understanding what the needs are if we're not engaging a student body enough? That's not anything people really know unless you ask the questions: how many students took the survey? How many students attended the focus group? You have to be transparent about, okay, well, if this was student-led or with student input, we can't really say that if it's less than 5 students that participated in an entire community college. So these are the questions that I had to find out by asking, because it wasn't public. Yes, maybe the document may be public if you ask for it, but even within the document, it doesn't say how many students actually participated in the focus groups, right? So there's so much that goes with a lot of the design of how we do things. And it's really about being engaged from the very beginning and asking the right questions and being informed about what to ask. So definitely, I think my advice is it's also good to get feedback from people with experience to know what kind of questions to ask, because when you're starting, you really don't know what to ask until you're in it. And that's kind of like how I started in the beginning, but we all have the capacity and capability of excelling in these board positions. So,
and I want to mention that Sandra Hickson said something that I think is really critical. Board members certainly need to read everything that's in their board packets, but board members have to educate themselves. When I first started on a school board, there was a bunch of stuff I had to learn. I did not know much about school law. Just for example, in most occupations, if someone's not doing their job, we say fire them. That's not the case in schools, right? So there's a whole lot that you have to learn when you become a school board member, and you have to put the time in, which was giving up a lot of other things that I did in order to dedicate the time that I needed to dedicate to educate myself in terms of being the best school board member that I could. So I do appreciate you talking about that, because it is time consuming and it takes up a great deal of your time and a commitment on your part to do that.
Thank you.
Well, I actually appreciate all of you guys' time. We're coming to wrapping it up. We're getting close to that 7 o'clock time. And I just wanted to say that another thing that is really important, something that all of our candidates are dedicated to, is communicating. Communicating with the public in a respectful manner actually brings more engagement. So if you're able to get the message out, even for students to want to participate, for parents to want to participate, that communication line should be open and welcoming. And that is definitely something that our candidates are engaged in. If you guys have any last comments, did you want to make, the candidates?
Yes.
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Sandra.
I'm sorry, Jenny. Thank you so much. This was really excellent educational for our community. And so thank you so much for being there and taking the time out to listen to us. Thank you.
Yes, I very much appreciate the willingness for the community to come together and to help us all learn. And I think one of the things that we are committed to is doing the homework, doing the reading, finding out and learning, because we're always learning, right? And you don't have to have experience at something because everybody started a novice at some point. So we are dedicated to coming to the Board of Education in a respectful way, and we're ready to do the work with transparency, with accountability, and with a dedication to make sure that our students are at the center of our policies and how they affect our students.
And then thank you all. Thank you, Judge Chase and State Rep Hernandez, for your knowledge and imparting wisdom with us. I feel that by following these policies and procedures and actually implementing them, we can have the desired outcomes that I know the community wants. Right? We all want sound decisions. We all want results and a sane board and just productive meetings. But so thank you all for your help in all of this.
I appreciate it. And again, thank you for our panel, State Rep Norma Hernandez and Honorable Judge Gay Chase. We appreciate your time. We appreciate you guys giving us these wise bits of wisdom. And I appreciate all of you for joining us at this candidate conversation. Stay tuned for our next one. And, be aware our candidates are out there. We'll be knocking on your door soon.
I want to thank Eileen for putting this together and for the great questions and the format. So thank you so much for all the work that you did to do this presentation for the community.
I appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.